Sarah Martinez stepped out of her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of Blackwater Air Base, her worn sneakers crunching on the gravel. The other pilots gathered around the sleek jets turned to stare, their expensive aviator sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. She could hear their whispers and barely contained laughter as she walked past. "Look what the wind blew in," muttered Jake Morrison, a cocky pilot with perfectly styled hair and a uniform that looked like it had never seen real combat. His father owned 3 defense contracting companies, which everyone at the base knew. Did maintenance forget to close the gate again? Sarah kept her head high and continued walking toward the briefing room. Her military-issued flight jacket was faded and patched in several places, a stark contrast to the pristine leather jackets worn by her fellow pilots. She had earned every scratch and stain on that jacket through years of dangerous missions that most of these privileged pilots would never even dream of attempting. Lieutenant Commander. Rebecca Stone watched from across the tarmac, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene unfolding before her. She had been waiting for this moment for months, ever since she received the classified orders from Pentagon officials. Today would change everything, but none of these arrogant pilots had any idea what was coming. "Hey, Charity Case," called out Marcus Webb, another Silver Spoon pilot whose uncle was a 3-star general. "You sure you're in the right place? The civilian airport is about 20 miles that way." He pointed dramatically toward the horizon, causing his group of followers to burst into laughter. Sarah finally stopped walking and turned to face them. Her dark eyes were calm but determined, showing no trace of the anger or embarrassment they expected to see. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. The group of pilots exchanged glances, surprised by her composed response. They had expected her to either run away in tears or lash out in anger. Instead, she stood there with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse than a few spoiled bullies. "Right," Jake said with a smirk. "And I suppose that rust bucket you drove here is your personal fighter jet?" The others laughed even harder at this comment, slapping each other on the back as if Jake had just delivered the greatest comedy routine in military history. Sarah glanced back at her old car, then looked directly at Jake. "Transportation is transportation," she replied simply. "It gets me where I need to go." She paused for a moment, then added with a slight smile, "Just like everything else in my life." Commander Stone stepped forward, her boots clicking sharply on the concrete. The laughter died immediately as the pilot snapped to attention, recognizing her authority. "Gentlemen," she said in a voice that could cut through steel, "I believe you have pre-flight checks to complete, unless, of course, you'd prefer to explain to the general why his top pilots were too busy gossiping to ensure their aircraft were mission-ready." The pilots scattered quickly, muttering apologies and excuses as they hurried toward their assigned jets. Only Sarah remained standing in place, waiting patiently for whatever would come next. "Ms. Martinez," Commander Stone said, her tone becoming noticeably warmer. "Walk with me." The 2 women headed toward the restricted section of the base, passing through security checkpoints that required the highest level of clearance. As they walked, Sarah noticed that Commander Stone was leading her away from the standard flight line, where the other pilots were preparing their F-16s and F-18s. Instead, they were heading toward a heavily guarded hangar that she had never seen opened in all her months at the base. "Tell me, Sarah," Commander Stone said as they approached the mysterious hangar, "what do you know about the Ghosthawk project?" The question was asked casually, but Sarah could sense the weight behind it. Sarah shook her head honestly. "I've never heard of it, ma'am." "Is it classified above my current security level?" Commander Stone smiled for the first time since Sarah had met her. "It was classified above everyone's security level until yesterday. The Pentagon finally decided it was time to put our most advanced aircraft into active service." She paused at the hangar door, her hand resting on a biometric scanner. "And they've specifically requested our best pilot to take it for its first real combat mission." The scanner beeped, and massive steel doors began to slide open with a mechanical whir that echoed across the empty tarmac. Sarah's eyes widened as she caught her first glimpse of what lay inside the darkened hangar, though she couldn't make out the details yet. "Best pilot?" Sarah asked, confusion evident in her voice. "But ma'am, I thought Jake Morrison was considered the top pilot in our squadron. His combat scores are—" "Jake Morrison," Commander Stone interrupted, has never faced real combat. His missions have all been training exercises or milk runs over friendly territory. His scores look impressive on paper because he's never been shot at by someone who actually wanted to kill him. She looked directly at Sarah. You, on the other hand, have completed 47 combat missions in hostile territory, including 6 deep reconnaissance flights behind enemy lines that saved countless lives. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and disbelief washing over her. She had always assumed that her missions were considered routine assignments that nobody else wanted to take. The dangerous flights into enemy territory, the nights spent evading surface-to-air missiles, the times she had barely made it back to base with her aircraft shot full of holes. She thought these were just part of being the low pilot on the totem pole. "Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence, but I don't understand why—" Commander Stone held up a hand to stop her. "Sarah, what you're about to see has been in development for 8 years and has cost the military more money than most small countries' entire defense budgets. It represents the absolute cutting edge of aviation technology, incorporating stealth capabilities that make our current aircraft look like flying billboards by comparison." The hangar doors finished opening, and automatic lights began illuminating the space inside. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw what had been hidden in the shadows. Before her sat an aircraft unlike anything she had ever seen, its sleek black surface seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The aircraft before Sarah looked like something from a science fiction movie. The Ghosthawk sat silent and imposing in the center of the hangar, its angular design defying everything she thought she knew about aerodynamics. The surface wasn't just black. It seemed to shift and change as the light hit it from different angles, almost as if the metal itself was alive. "This is impossible," Sarah whispered, walking slowly around the aircraft. The wings were swept back at an extreme angle, and instead of traditional engines, there appeared to be some kind of advanced propulsion system integrated seamlessly into the fuselage. "How does something this shape even fly?" Commander Stone followed her around the aircraft, clearly enjoying Sarah's amazement. "The Ghosthawk uses technology that's still classified at the highest levels. What I can tell you is that it's completely invisible to radar, thermal imaging, and most other detection systems. It can fly at speeds that would tear apart conventional aircraft, and it's equipped with weapon systems that could level a city block without anyone knowing where the attack came from." Sarah stopped walking and stared at the commander. "And you want me to fly this?" "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've been flying modified F-16s for the past 3 years. This is so far beyond anything I've ever experienced that I wouldn't even know where to start." "That's exactly why you're perfect for it," Commander Stone replied with conviction. "Jake Morrison and pilots like him have been trained to fly by the book. They follow procedures, stick to protocols, and never deviate from their training. The Ghosthawk requires something different. It needs a pilot who can think on her feet, adapt to impossible situations, and make split-second decisions when everything goes wrong." A team of technicians emerged from the shadows of the hangar, each wearing coveralls with security badges that Sarah had never seen before. They began running through what appeared to be pre-flight checks, but their equipment looked more like something from a space program than anything she recognized from conventional aircraft maintenance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead engineer on the Ghosthawk project, approached with a tablet displaying dozens of technical readouts. "Commander Stone, we're showing green across all systems. The neural interface is calibrated and ready for pilot integration." "Neural interface?" Sarah asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. "What exactly does that mean?" Dr. Vasquez smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, it's completely safe. The Ghosthawk responds to thought patterns as much as physical controls. The interface allows for reaction times that are literally faster than human reflexes. Instead of thinking about turning left and then moving your hands to make it happen, the aircraft responds to your intention directly." Sarah looked back at the sleek aircraft with new understanding and a healthy dose of fear. "So this thing reads my mind?" "In a very limited sense, yes," Dr. Vasquez explained. "But only flight-related thoughts. It can't access your memories, emotions, or personal information. Think of it as a very sophisticated autopilot that takes its cues from your brain instead of from computer programming." Commander Stone checked her watch and frowned. "We're running behind schedule. Sarah, I need to brief you on your mission while the technicians finish their preparations. What you're about to hear cannot leave this hangar under any circumstances." They moved to a secure briefing room adjacent to the hangar, where wall-mounted screens displayed satellite imagery of a mountainous region that Sarah didn't immediately recognize. Red markers indicated hostile positions, while blue dots showed the locations of friendly forces that appeared to be completely surrounded. 12 hours ago, Commander Stone began, a reconnaissance team was inserted into this valley in the mountains of Afghanistan to gather intelligence on a suspected weapons manufacturing facility. What they found was much worse than we expected. The facility isn't just making conventional weapons, they're developing chemical weapons using materials that could kill thousands of people if deployed in populated areas. Sarah studied the satellite images carefully, noting the terrain and weather patterns. Let me guess, the team is trapped and can't get out with the intelligence they've gathered. Exactly. Conventional rescue missions have failed because the enemy has surface-to-air missiles positioned throughout the valley. Any aircraft flying below 15,000 feet gets shot down immediately, and anything flying higher than that can't provide effective support to ground forces. 3 helicopters have already been lost trying to extract the team. The images on the screen zoomed in to show the wreckage of the downed aircraft, their twisted metal scattered across the rocky landscape like broken toys. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she realized that real people had died in those crashes. People who had families waiting for them to come home. The Ghosthawk can fly through that missile field without being detected, Commander Stone continued. Its stealth capabilities are so advanced that it might as well be invisible to their targeting systems. But the mission requires more than just avoiding missiles. The pilot needs to land in hostile territory, extract 6 people under enemy fire, and make it back to base with intelligence that could prevent a terrorist attack on American soil. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the enormous responsibility being placed on her shoulders. How long do I have to think about this? You don't, Commander Stone replied bluntly. The team on the ground has maybe 6 hours of ammunition left, and weather reports show a storm system moving in that will make any rescue attempt impossible for at least a week. If we don't get them out today, they're going to die, and the intelligence they've gathered dies with them. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. 6 lives hung in the balance, along with potentially thousands more if the chemical weapons fell into the wrong hands. She thought about Jake Morrison and the other pilots back on the flight line, wondering if any of them would have the courage to take on a mission like this. What about backup? She asked. If something goes wrong with the Ghosthawk, what's the contingency plan? Commander Stone's expression darkened. There is no backup. The Ghosthawk is a prototype. There's only one of them in existence. If you go down, you're on your own until we can mount a conventional rescue mission, which could take days or weeks depending on the political situation. Sarah looked through the briefing room window at the mysterious aircraft sitting in the hangar. It represented the pinnacle of human engineering and technology, but it was also completely untested in real combat conditions. She would be risking not just her own life, but the lives of the 6 people depending on her to bring them home safely. Commander, she said finally, I need to know something. Why me, really? There have to be pilots with more experience, better training, higher security clearances. Why choose someone that half the base thinks is a charity case? Commander Stone was quiet for a moment, then pulled up Sarah's service record on one of the screens. Because 3 years ago, when your squadron was ambushed over Syria and your wingman was shot down, you didn't follow orders to return to base. Instead, you flew into enemy territory, landed your damaged aircraft in the middle of a firefight, and carried your unconscious wingman to safety while taking small arms fire. You saved his life at the risk of your own, and you did it without hesitation. Sarah remembered that day vividly, the screaming alarms in her cockpit, the taste of blood from where she had bitten her tongue during the crash landing, the weight of her wingman's body as she dragged him away from their burning aircraft. She had never thought of it as heroic. It had simply been the right thing to do. Sarah made her decision with the same quiet determination that had defined her entire military career. I'll do it, she said simply, though her heart was racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. When do we start? Commander Stone smiled with genuine relief. Right now. Dr. Vasquez has been waiting to begin your integration with the Ghosthawk systems. They returned to the hangar where the mysterious aircraft waited, its black surface seeming to pulse with hidden energy. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of technical briefings and equipment fittings. Sarah found herself wearing a flight suit unlike anything she had ever seen, made from a material that felt like silk, but was apparently stronger than steel. The helmet was the most unusual part. Instead of a traditional visor, it had a completely clear faceplate that somehow displayed flight information directly onto her field of vision. The suit monitors your vital signs and adjusts automatically to changing conditions, Dr. Vasquez explained as she helped Sarah with the final adjustments. If you're injured, it can apply pressure to wounds and even inject emergency medications. The helmet links directly to the Ghosthawk's neural interface, allowing you to control the aircraft with unprecedented precision. Sarah climbed into the Ghosthawk's cockpit and immediately understood why this aircraft needed such advanced technology. There were no traditional flight controls, no yoke, no rudder pedals, no throttle levers. Instead, the pilot's seat was surrounded by smooth surfaces that glowed softly, with built-in displays showing everything from engine status to weapon systems. Place your hands on the control surfaces, Dr. Vasquez instructed from outside the cockpit. The aircraft will begin calibrating to your neural patterns automatically. The moment Sarah's hands touched the glowing panels, she felt a strange tingling sensation, as if electricity was flowing gently through her nervous system. The helmet's display suddenly came alive with information, showing her not just the aircraft's status but also three-dimensional maps of the surrounding area and real-time weather data. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed as she watched the displays respond to her thoughts. When she imagined turning left, the aircraft's control surfaces moved slightly in response. When she thought about climbing, the engine spooled up marginally, ready to provide the thrust she hadn't even requested yet. "The calibration process will continue as you fly," Dr. Vasquez explained. "The longer you're connected to the aircraft, the more responsive it becomes to your intentions. Some test pilots have described it as becoming one with the machine." Commander Stone appeared at the cockpit edge, her expression serious. "Sarah, I've just received an update from the field. The reconnaissance team is taking heavy fire, and they've had to move from their original position. The extraction point has changed, which makes this mission even more dangerous than we originally planned." Sarah reviewed the updated mission parameters on her helmet display, noting that the new extraction zone was in an area with even heavier enemy concentration. "How much time do they have?" 4 hours, maybe 5 if they're lucky and can find better cover. "But Sarah, there's something else you need to know." Commander Stone paused, clearly struggling with what she was about to say. "Intelligence suggests that the enemy has somehow acquired advanced anti-aircraft weapons, possibly from foreign military suppliers. We're not entirely certain that even the Ghosthawk's stealth capabilities will be sufficient." The information hit Sarah like a physical blow. She was about to fly an untested aircraft into the most dangerous airspace imaginable, with the lives of 6 people depending on her success. The margin for error was essentially 0, and failure meant not just her own death but the deaths of the people counting on her to save them. "Commander," Sarah said quietly, "I need a minute to think." "You don't have a minute," came the blunt reply. "Every second we delay increases the chance that those people die. I know this is asking more of you than anyone should have to give, but you're the only person who can make this work." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to center herself, drawing on the meditation techniques her grandfather had taught her during childhood summers at his ranch. He had been a fighter pilot during World War II, and he had always told her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of that fear when people's lives were at stake. "All right," she said, opening her eyes with new resolve. "Let's bring them home." The hangar doors opened again, revealing the afternoon sky beyond. Sarah felt the Ghosthawk respond to her readiness, its engines coming online with a sound unlike anything she had ever heard. Not the roar of conventional jet engines, but a deep, almost musical hum that seemed to resonate in her bones. As the aircraft began to move forward under its own power, Sarah was amazed by how smooth and quiet the ride was. Traditional fighter jets were violent, noisy machines that shook their pilots constantly. The Ghosthawk felt more like floating on air than flying through it. "Ghosthawk 1, you are cleared for takeoff," came the voice of the air traffic controller, though Sarah knew that this aircraft wouldn't appear on any radar screens or flight tracking systems. For all practical purposes, she was about to become invisible to the entire world. The takeoff was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Instead of the brutal acceleration and climbing angle of conventional aircraft, the Ghosthawk rose smoothly and silently into the sky, its advanced propulsion system making the transition from ground to air feel effortless. Within minutes, Sarah was flying at an altitude and speed that would have been impossible in any other aircraft. The landscape below passed by in a blur, but her helmet display kept her perfectly oriented and informed about her position relative to the mission area. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the communication system, the scientist monitoring every aspect of the flight from her position in the command center. "Like I'm flying a spaceship instead of an airplane," Sarah replied honestly. "The responsiveness is incredible. It's almost like the aircraft knows what I want to do before I do." "That's exactly how it's supposed to work," Dr. Vasquez responded with obvious pride. "The neural interface learns from your flying patterns and begins to anticipate your needs. By the time you reach the mission area, the Ghosthawk should feel like an extension of your own body." As they flew toward Afghanistan, Sarah couldn't help but think about Jake Morrison and the other pilots back at the base. They were probably sitting in the officers' club right now, congratulating themselves on their latest training scores and making jokes about the girl with the beat-up Honda. None of them had any idea that she was flying the most advanced aircraft in human history on a mission that could change the course of international security. The irony wasn't lost on her. While they had been focusing on looking good and impressing superior officers, she had been quietly building the skills and experience that actually mattered when lives were on the line. Their expensive cars and designer uniforms meant nothing when people were depending on a pilot's ability to make life-or-death decisions under impossible conditions. "Sarah, we're getting radio contact from the reconnaissance team." Commander Stone's voice crackled through the communication system. "They're requesting immediate extraction. The enemy has discovered their position and is closing in fast." Sarah checked her position and realized she was still over an hour away from the mission area. "Can they hold out that long?" "They'll have to. You're their only hope." The mountains of Afghanistan appeared on the horizon like jagged teeth against the darkening sky. Sarah could see flashes of light in the valleys below, muzzle flashes from small arms fire and the larger explosions of mortars and rocket-propelled grenades. The reconnaissance team was in a full firefight, desperately trying to stay alive long enough for rescue to arrive. "Ghosthawk 1, this is Viper 6, came a strained voice over the radio. Sarah could hear gunfire in the background and knew she was listening to one of the trapped soldiers. "We've got approximately 30 hostiles closing on our position. We're down to our last few magazines of ammunition." "Viper 6, this is Ghosthawk 1, Sarah replied, pushing the advanced aircraft to even greater speed. "I'm 15 minutes out from your position. Can you give me a visual reference point for landing?" "Negative, Ghosthawk. The LZ is too hot. They've got RPGs and heavy machine guns covering all the flat ground. You'll be shot down before you can touch down." Sarah studied the terrain data on her helmet display, noting the steep cliffs and narrow ridges that surrounded the valley where the team was trapped. Any conventional aircraft would indeed be destroyed trying to land in such conditions, but the Ghosthawk wasn't conventional. "Viper 6, I need you to mark your position with infrared strobes. I'm coming in whether the landing zone is clear or not." There was a pause on the radio then. "Ghosthawk, are you insane? There's no way any aircraft can land here. The terrain is impossible and the enemy has the entire area covered. Trust me." "Viper 6, just mark your position and be ready to move fast when I arrive." Sarah began her descent into the valley and immediately understood why 3 previous rescue attempts had failed. The mountainsides were bristling with anti-aircraft weapons, from shoulder-fired missiles to larger surface-to-air systems that could down even high-altitude bombers. Any traditional aircraft entering this airspace would be destroyed within seconds, but the Ghosthawk was invisible. As Sarah flew through the missile field, she watched her displays show dozens of targeting radars sweeping the sky around her, unable to detect her presence. It was an eerie feeling flying through a storm of deadly weapons that couldn't see her, even though she was only a few hundred feet away. "Warning, warning," came an automated voice from the Ghosthawk's defensive systems. "Multiple missile launches detected. Incoming projectiles from multiple vectors." Sarah's heart stopped as she saw the contrails of surface-to-air missiles rising toward her position. Somehow the enemy had managed to track her despite the stealth technology. The neural interface responded to her panic, instantly calculating evasive maneuvers and implementing them faster than any human pilot could have managed. The Ghosthawk twisted through the air like a living thing, its impossible aerodynamics allowing it to make turns that would have torn apart any conventional aircraft. Missiles streaked past Sarah's cockpit, missing by mere feet as the aircraft seemed to dance between the deadly projectiles. "How are they tracking me?" Sarah shouted into her radio as she continued to evade the incoming fire. "Unknown," came Dr. Vasquez's voice from the command center, tension clear in her tone. "The stealth systems are functioning normally. They shouldn't be able to see you." Sarah had a sudden realization as she watched another missile streak toward her position. "They're not tracking me directly. They're using a grid search pattern, firing at every possible flight path into the valley. It's like throwing a net into dark water. They can't see the fish, but if they throw enough nets, they'll eventually catch something." The enemy's strategy was crude but effective. They were literally filling the sky with missiles and hoping to hit the invisible aircraft through sheer volume of fire. It was wasteful and expensive, but it was also working. "Sarah, you need to abort," Commander Stone's voice cut through the chaos. "The risk is too great. We'll find another way to extract the team." "Negative," Sarah replied firmly as she maneuvered around another volley of missiles. "Those people are going to die if I don't get them out right now. There is no other way." She pushed the Ghosthawk into a steep dive, heading directly toward the valley floor where she could see the infrared strobes marking the reconnaissance team's position. The enemy fire intensified as she got closer to the ground, but the steep walls of the valley began to provide some protection from the missile sites on the surrounding ridges. "Viper 6, I'm coming in hot. Be ready to run toward my aircraft the moment I touch down." "Ghosthawk, I can see you now," came the amazed voice of the team leader. "What the hell are you flying? I've never seen anything like it." Sarah was too busy to respond as she searched for a place to land among the rocky terrain. The Ghosthawk's vertical takeoff and landing capabilities were about to be tested under the worst possible conditions. She found a narrow ledge barely wide enough for the aircraft's wingspan and began to descend toward it. The landing was more like controlled falling than flying. The Ghosthawk's advanced flight systems automatically adjusted for wind gusts and terrain irregularities, but Sarah could feel the aircraft straining against the impossible conditions. Rocks and debris scattered as the powerful engines fought to keep the aircraft stable on the uneven surface. "Go, go, go!" Sarah shouted as the 6 members of the reconnaissance team sprinted toward the aircraft. She could see enemy soldiers advancing down the mountainside, their weapons trained on the landing site. The first soldier to reach the Ghosthawk was a young sergeant with a bandaged arm and blood on his uniform. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you're either crazy or the best pilot I've ever seen," he said as he helped his wounded teammates into the aircraft. "Both," Sarah replied grimly as enemy gunfire began impacting the rocks around them. "Everyone aboard?" "All 6 accounted for," came the team leader's voice. "But we've got company coming fast." Sarah looked up to see enemy fighters positioning themselves on the ridges above the valley, armed with rocket-propelled grenades aimed directly at her aircraft. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they would be in position to destroy the Ghosthawk on the ground. "Hold on," she warned her passengers as she pushed the aircraft's engines to maximum power. The vertical takeoff was even more violent than the landing had been, with the Ghosthawk clawing its way into the sky while enemy fire erupted all around them. An RPG streaked past the cockpit so close that Sarah could see the pilot light on its warhead. Another exploded against the cliff face just below them, showering the aircraft with rock fragments. The Ghosthawk's armor held, but Sarah could see warning lights beginning to appear on her displays. "We've taken some damage," she reported to the command center as they climbed away from the valley floor. "But nothing critical yet." "Sarah, you've got multiple fighters scrambling from the airbase to the east," Commander Stone warned. "Enemy jets will be on your position in less than 10 minutes. The rescued reconnaissance team looked at each other with concern. They had assumed that reaching the aircraft meant they were safe, but now they realized that the most dangerous part of the mission was just beginning. They were flying in an experimental aircraft that had never been tested in real combat, piloted by someone they had never met, being pursued by enemy fighters who would shoot them down without hesitation. "Ma'am," the team leader said to Sarah, "what exactly are our chances of making it home?" Sarah checked her fuel levels and calculated the distance to friendly airspace. The numbers weren't encouraging, especially with enemy fighters closing in and the damage they had already sustained. "About 50-50, she replied honestly. "But those are better odds than you had on the ground." The enemy fighters appeared on Sarah's display like angry wasps converging on their position. 4 MiG-29s were approaching fast from the east while 2 more were climbing to intercept from the south. The Ghosthawk was faster than any of them, but Sarah was carrying 6 additional people and flying a damaged aircraft with limited fuel. Ghosthawk 1, this is Eagle Base, came a new voice over the radio. We're tracking multiple hostile aircraft converging on your position. You are cleared to engage if necessary. Sarah's passengers looked at each other nervously. None of them had expected to be in an air-to-air combat situation, and they weren't sure what weapons the mysterious black aircraft actually carried. Copy. Eagle Base, Sarah replied as she studied the weapons display that appeared on her helmet's heads-up system. The Ghosthawk was equipped with missiles she had never heard of, using technology that was apparently years ahead of anything in the conventional military arsenal. Contact, called out Sergeant Williams, the reconnaissance team leader, as he looked out one of the aircraft's small windows. I can see contrails closing from our 6 o'clock position. The first MiG opened fire with a long-range missile, its white contrail streaking through the darkening sky toward the Ghosthawk's position. Sarah felt the aircraft's defensive systems respond automatically, deploying countermeasures she didn't even know existed while simultaneously calculating an evasive maneuver that took advantage of the mountain terrain below. The missile exploded harmlessly against a cliff face as the Ghosthawk dove into a narrow canyon, flying so low that its wingtips nearly scraped the rocky walls. The enemy fighters couldn't follow without risking collision with the mountainsides, but they spread out above the canyon, waiting for the stealth aircraft to emerge. This is insane, muttered Corporal Jackson, one of the rescued soldiers, as he watched the canyon walls flash past at incredible speed. How are we flying this fast this close to the ground? Advanced flight control systems, Sarah explained tersely as she concentrated on navigating the treacherous terrain. The aircraft can react faster than human reflexes to avoid obstacles. But the canyon was a dead end, terminating at a massive waterfall that dropped into a deep gorge. The enemy fighters had positioned themselves at the only exit, creating a perfect trap. Any conventional pilot would have been forced to climb into their waiting guns. Sarah, however, wasn't conventional. Everyone hold on. This is going to feel weird. She aimed the Ghosthawk directly at the waterfall and pushed the engines to maximum power. At the last possible moment, she activated systems she hadn't even known existed, vertical thrust, vectoring that allowed the aircraft to change direction in ways that violated everything she thought she knew about physics. The Ghosthawk shot straight up the face of the waterfall like a rocket, climbing so rapidly that the pursuing fighters couldn't adjust their aim fast enough to track it. Within seconds, Sarah had gained altitude advantage over her attackers and was now looking down at the confused enemy pilots. Splash 1, she announced calmly as she fired her first missile. The weapon was unlike anything she had ever used, moving so fast that it reached its target almost instantaneously. The lead MiG simply disintegrated in a ball of fire, its pilot never knowing what had hit him. The remaining enemy fighters scattered, trying to use their numbers to overwhelm the single stealth aircraft. But the Ghosthawk's advanced targeting systems could track all of them simultaneously, and its weapons could engage multiple targets at once. Sarah, you've got 2 more climbing to your altitude from the west, Dr. Vasquez warned from the command center, and intelligence reports that enemy reinforcements are scrambling from 3 additional air bases. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Even with the Ghosthawk's advanced capabilities, Sarah couldn't fight an entire air force while protecting 6 passengers and nursing a damaged aircraft home. She needed to end this engagement quickly and get to friendly airspace before more enemy fighters arrived. Time to see what this thing can really do, she muttered as she selected a weapons mode she had only read about in the technical briefings. The Ghosthawk's experimental railgun came online, charging with a sound like building thunder. The railgun fired a projectile at such incredible velocity that the enemy fighters didn't even see it coming. The second MiG simply came apart in midair as the kinetic projectile passed through it like tissue paper. The remaining enemy pilots, realizing they were facing technology far beyond their ability to counter, broke off their attack and fled toward friendly territory. Outstanding shooting. Ghosthawk 1, came Commander Stone's voice over the radio. You've cleared the immediate threat, but we're showing massive enemy activity across the region. They know something important just happened, and they're throwing everything they have at trying to find you. Sarah checked her fuel levels and calculated the distance to the Pakistan border, where friendly fighters would provide escort. The numbers were tight. They might make it, but there wouldn't be any margin for error or additional combat. Viper 6, how are you and your people doing back there? Sarah asked her passengers. We're alive, which is more than we expected an hour ago, Sergeant Williams replied. Ma'am, I don't know what kind of aircraft this is or where you learned to fly like that, but you just saved our lives in ways I didn't think were possible. The mission isn't over yet, Sarah warned as new contacts appeared on her display. We've got a long way to go before we're safe. The rescued, intelligence gathered by the reconnaissance team was stored in encrypted hard drives that could prevent a major terrorist attack if they reached American analysts in time. But getting that intelligence home meant flying through hundreds of miles of hostile airspace filled with enemy fighters, who now knew that some kind of advanced American aircraft was operating in their territory. Sarah, we're getting reports that the enemy has activated every surface-to-air missile site within 200 miles of your position, Commander Stone reported grimly. They're creating a wall of fire between you and friendly territory. Sarah studied the tactical display showing the incredible concentration of anti-aircraft weapons being deployed against them. The enemy was taking no chances. They were willing to expend enormous resources to prevent the Ghosthawk from escaping with its intelligence cargo. Well, she said to her passengers, I hope you're not afraid of flying low and fast, because we're about to thread the needle through the biggest missile field in military history. Corporal Jackson looked out the window at the mountainous terrain below. Ma'am, with all due respect, I think I speak for all of us when I say that after what you've already done today, we're willing to follow you anywhere. The other team members nodded their agreement. They had watched this unknown pilot perform impossible maneuvers in an aircraft that seemed to defy the laws of physics. If anyone could get them home safely, it was the woman in the pilot's seat who had already proven that she could work miracles when lives were on the line. All right then, Sarah said as she began her descent toward the dangerous run through enemy territory. Let's go home. But as they approached the border region, Sarah's worst fears were realized. The entire sky ahead of them was filled with missile contrails and tracer fire. The enemy had indeed created a wall of death that stretched from the ground to 30,000 feet, making escape seem impossible even for the advanced Ghosthawk. The wall of fire ahead of them was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Hundreds of surface-to-air missiles filled the sky, their contrails creating a deadly web that seemed to block every possible escape route. The enemy had positioned mobile missile launchers along every ridge and valley, creating overlapping fields of fire that would destroy any aircraft attempting to pass through. Ghosthawk 1, you need to turn back. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the radio, strain evident in her tone. The missile density is beyond anything we calculated. Even the stealth systems can't protect you against that volume of fire. Sarah studied her options on the tactical display. Going around the missile field would add hundreds of miles to their flight path, and they didn't have enough fuel. Going over it would put them at altitude where larger surface-to-air missiles could reach them. Going through it seemed like suicide. Ma'am, Sergeant Williams said quietly from behind her, if we don't make it, I want you to know that what you've done today is the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. You came into hell itself to save us. We're not done yet, Sarah replied with determination. She activated systems on the Ghosthawk that she had never used before, watching as new displays appeared on her helmet showing energy patterns and electromagnetic signatures that she didn't fully understand. Dr. Vasquez, what happens if I route all auxiliary power to the stealth systems? Can we become completely invisible to their targeting radars? Theoretically, yes, but you'd lose most of your defensive countermeasures and weapon systems. If even one missile gets close enough, you won't have any way to stop it. Sarah made her decision. Do it. Route everything to stealth. The Ghosthawk's interior lighting dimmed as power was diverted to the advanced camouflage systems. On her helmet display, Sarah could see the aircraft's signature disappearing almost completely from the electromagnetic spectrum. To enemy radar operators, the Ghosthawk would now appear as nothing more than atmospheric interference. Here we go, she announced as she flew directly into the missile field. The experience was surreal and terrifying. Missiles streaked past the cockpit in all directions, their proximity alarms screaming warnings that Sarah had to ignore. The enemy was firing blindly, hoping to hit the invisible aircraft through sheer volume of ordnance. An explosion erupted just off the port wing, close enough to rock the aircraft and spider-crack one of the cockpit windows. Shrapnel pinged off the Ghosthawk's armored hull, but the advanced materials held against the punishment. Warning: structural integrity at 87%. announced the aircraft's computer as another. Near miss sent shockwaves through the airframe. Sarah flew through the chaos with inhuman precision, the neural interface allowing her to process information and make corrections faster than any conventional pilot could have managed. She threaded the needle between missile contrails, dove under radar sweeps, and climbed over surface-to-air installations with split-second timing that left no room for error. Halfway through the missile field, disaster struck. A lucky shot from a shoulder-fired missile struck the Ghosthawk's port engine, causing a cascade of system failures. Warning lights flooded Sarah's display as the advanced aircraft began losing power and altitude. "We're hit," she announced as she fought to maintain control. "Engine 2 is down and we're losing hydraulic pressure." The rescued soldiers looked at each other with grim understanding. They were still deep in enemy territory, flying a crippled aircraft through a storm of missiles. Even if they survived the next few minutes, the chances of reaching friendly airspace were rapidly approaching zero. "Sarah, we're showing massive system failures," Dr. Vasquez reported from the command center. "You need to find a place to put down immediately." "Negative," Sarah replied through gritted teeth as she compensated for the damaged engine. These people didn't survive behind enemy lines for days just to die in a crash landing. "We're making it home." She pushed the remaining engine beyond its design limits, coaxing every bit of power from the damaged aircraft. The Ghosthawk shuddered and groaned under the strain, but it continued flying through sheer determination and superior engineering. The edge of the missile field finally appeared ahead of them, marked by the last line of surface-to-air installations. Beyond that lay Pakistani airspace where American fighters would provide escort home. But first they had to survive one final gauntlet of enemy fire. "Contact! Contact!" Sergeant Williams called out. Multiple fighters approaching from the southeast. 6 enemy MiGs had appeared on the horizon, converging on the damaged Ghosthawk for one last attempt to prevent its escape. With only one engine and limited power, Sarah couldn't outrun them or outmaneuver them in a conventional dogfight, but she still had one weapon left, the experimental railgun that had proven so effective earlier in the mission. The problem was that it required enormous amounts of power to charge, power that the crippled aircraft could barely provide. "Dr. Vasquez, what happens if I divert life support power to weapons?" Sarah asked as the enemy fighters closed the distance. "You'll have about 90 seconds of consciousness before oxygen deprivation. Affects your judgment?" came the sobering reply. Sarah looked back at the 6 men who had trusted their lives to her piloting skills. They had already endured more than any soldiers should have to face, and they deserved to see their families again. "Sorry, gentlemen, but this ride is about to get a little uncomfortable," she announced as she began transferring power from life support to the railgun. The cockpit began to grow cold as the environmental system shut down, but the weapons display showed the railgun charging to full power. Sarah had one shot to clear the way home, and she couldn't afford to miss. The lead enemy fighter opened fire with conventional missiles, forcing Sarah into evasive maneuvers that stressed the damaged airframe beyond its limits. Metal groaned and rivets popped as the Ghosthawk twisted through the air, but somehow it held together long enough for the railgun to reach full charge. Sarah fired all 6 rounds in rapid succession, the kinetic projectiles moving so fast that they were invisible to the naked eye. The enemy fighters simply disintegrated as the hypersonic rounds passed through them, clearing the sky of threats in a matter of seconds. But the effort had cost them. The Ghosthawk's remaining engine began to fail as Sarah pushed it beyond its tolerance limits. Warning alarms filled the cockpit as multiple systems approached catastrophic failure. "Pakistani border in sight," she announced as the friendly airspace appeared ahead of them. "American fighters moving to escort position." 2 F-22 Raptors appeared alongside the limping Ghosthawk, their pilots amazed by the unusual aircraft they were being asked to protect. Radio chatter filled the airwaves as word spread through military channels that the mysterious rescue mission had somehow succeeded. The landing at Blackwater Air Base was more controlled crash than conventional approach. Emergency vehicles lined the runway as Sarah brought the crippled Ghosthawk down with systems failing throughout the aircraft. The touchdown was hard enough to crack the landing gear, but everyone walked away alive. As the engines finally shut down and the cockpit grew quiet, Sarah realized that she could hear cheering from outside the aircraft. Ground crews and pilots who had gathered to watch the impossible mission's conclusion were celebrating the safe return of both the reconnaissance team and the precious intelligence they carried. Jake Morrison stood among the crowd, his face pale with shock, as he realized that the pilot he had mocked that morning had just completed the most dangerous mission in recent military history. The beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to what really mattered when lives were on the line. Commander. Stone was the first to reach the cockpit as Sarah struggled out of her flight gear. Outstanding work, pilot. The intelligence your passengers brought back has already prevented a major terrorist attack. You've saved thousands of lives today. Sarah looked back at the 6 soldiers climbing out of the aircraft, each of them alive because she had been willing to risk everything to bring them home. It didn't matter what anyone thought about her car or her background. What mattered was that when people needed help, she had answered the call without hesitation. As news of the successful mission spread throughout the base, Sarah Martinez was no longer the pilot that others mocked. She was the woman who had taken the Ghosthawk into impossible conditions and brought everyone home safely. Her quiet competence and unwavering courage had proven that true strength came not from privilege or appearance, but from the willingness to do what was right when everything was on the line. The Ghosthawk sat silent on the tarmac, its black surface scarred by enemy fire but its mission complete. It had lived up to its promise as the most advanced aircraft ever built, but more importantly, it had been flown by someone worthy of its capabilities. Together, pilot and machine had achieved the impossible and brought 6 heroes home to their families.